Greetings and welcome to this natural hair mentorship podcast. Welcoming all the guests, new guests, anybody who's interested in natural hair concerns, especially a lot of us in the diaspora and Africa. It's great to be here in Kenya recording this morning. It's such a pleasure. I thought I'll share or get this podcast started in Kenya because it's my native land. It's where I was born. Although I didn't grow up here, I've got a large affinity to this country, and it's my heart, it's my home, and it is my foundation. So, as it relates to even our hair, like having a healthy head of natural hair, you've got to have a proper foundation and good practices. And we'll talk about that as we move forward. My name is Kirigo Kabuga. Growing up, I was called Anne Kirigo Kabuga. And when I turned 18, I was like, oh, that English word didn't quite resonate with who I am, who I was becoming, and what I was, beginning to understand about myself and my self expression. Yeah, so I was born in Kenya, and then my father was transferred to Canada when I was young, and I most of my just before my tween years, I grew up in Canada, going to living in a French city, Montreal, and I had to adapt to a new culture. So adaptation and acceptance of your situation always has been like the biggest lesson for me. And we'll also get to understand how that relates to our natural hair as we journey. Um, so growing up, I just can remember when I think about my hair journey, which was like really, really defining. I remember having like nightmares, really resisting going to the salons and getting my hair done. Of course, that was like my early years in Kenya. My mother was a conservative woman who felt that her children need to look appropriate and, um, to be a representation of, let's say, my father and his status, and what happens in a conservative lifestyle. And so she cared a lot about how our hair was kept, and she really cared about our hair being in its natural state. And I remember, it was great. So, but she herself was not our hair caregiver, although I preferred her doing it because she didn't really have skills in that area. And I think also personally, I would manipulate my little sessions with her, so much about, setting boundaries when we become stylists and making sure that our clients don't control the situation. And, as I continue to speak, I'm going to really relate to my life and also my life in this natural hair journey. And sometimes we think the natural hair journey starts when we're aware of it, maybe when we're 18, 19, but it's from birth. It's from our ancestors, from our history, from it's not separate. It's not one thing and then another. We come into it. It's who we are. It's our culture. It's our identity. And just a bit about hair. Hair was created by the Most High for protection. And as we come from, Africa, and the people who have had to live in Africa and survive the conditions, our hair has to grow a certain kind of way for protection. And when you think about hair and all over our body, it's there for protection. Over our eyebrows, our eyelashes, everything is there, particularly because it is a defense, from climate, society, I mean, conditions that you might be under. So, and I just want to share one great hair fact right now, while I'm on this topic. For example, our hair grows just like vegetation or trees, upwards and outwards towards the sun. There's a reason even why that coil is designed in a DNA molecule. Sometimes we don't stop to think about that. I really think that I have a lot of respect for natural hair. It is also the most delicate hair of all. So when we're talking about history, I also want to talk about how it starts. Understanding our genetic makeup is so important as it concerns full acceptance of how we are and how we show up in society. So back to the years when I was younger. So when I was 8, I rebelled. I just picked up scissors one day when my hair was undone by our nanny, and I cut the front of the hair. There was scissors sitting on my mom's dresser, and a voice said, "Free yourself." If I can put words to it, it was just a desire, and a really deep desire. And I know that I was doing that to free myself so I don't go back to the salon, because I had said it over and over again. I didn't want to go back there because the hair care was horrible. It was abusive. It was colonized mindset, because we're so far removed from understanding our hair pattern and how it behaves and how we should manage it, that I was we were victims under women who were angry and maybe, not being well paid. And these are the people who were serving us. And my mom would leave us and come back in an hour or two, expecting our hair to be shampooed. And, what we had lines, or they call cornrows today, in the natural hair industry. And all of it hurt. Even thinking about going there was a nightmare for me. So when I was 8, like, I was driven by all of those emotions. Sometimes we don't know why our children are responding the way they do, but there's a reason. We never stop to think about what's causing this. We go right into punishment, right? And so the child learns to not speak up. The child learns to um, conform, you know and then we lose our identity in the same form that we start doing the same thing with our crown. So that's like a double-edged sword to me, and how we're, being raised. And so what was interesting is when I cut my hair, the nanny freaked out because she didn't know what to tell my parents, because we were under her care. And so her advice to me was, when your parents arrive outside, just run outside, because I knew she didn't want to have to speak up about it, but it was also something we couldn't hide. And I looked like Bozo the Clown because I just really cut the front of my hair, where I could see, and the rest, this was enough for me to feel liberated at the time. It didn't even matter how I looked, to think about an 8-year-old really, you know, what people would define defiant, but really stepping up for myself, because I just didn't feel heard, and I had to save myself. And that was the only way I knew how. And so when my parents arrived, I ran outside as I was instructed. And as my parents were coming out the car, my mom was screaming, and she was, one comment that came out of her mouth that I remember is that she said, "Now I'll look like I have three boys instead of two girls and two boys." And that was the first comment, like, coming from her, And of course, I look up to her as my protector, And then my father, his reaction was laughter. And he said, "Well, great. Now we can no more crying in the weekends, and she could come with me and the boys and get the haircut." So, like, earlier on, from like the earliest part of my journey, I recall the men in my life being very supportive how I wore my hair. You know, it's a self-expression, and even till today, I continue to self-express with my hair and wear it differently. Like, even maybe people in my age group would only fantasize or live vicariously through me. So it's, for me, it's a form of liberation, always, always. um, and to probably impact someone else to, tap into their inner desires, as in terms of feeling free, to wear their hair naturally and to express themselves. Again, it's part of who we are. And over the years, being taught that we are less than, and we need to wear weaves and braids and etc. over the years so that we can be accepted in society. We could talk, that's like colonized mindset, slavery. the breakdown of our societies. But moving forward, so I found a lot of liberation in cutting my hair that time, you know. And then I quickly found out at the age of 10 that boys liked girls with hair. And now I was put in a situation where I was like, okay, well, I want to be liked. I want to fit in, you know. And by this time, we were in Canada. And so I started growing my hair. And we were in a country in Montreal where we didn't have many stylists who looked like me or who could cater to girls like me. So, and right before I left Kenya, I remember my grandmother saying, "Well, it's about time. You can now." Oh, she's of course in our native language in Kikuyu. She said, "You know, you now should think about doing your own hair." And that was very new to me. You know, someone actually even saying that I had never thought seen anyone get their doing their own hair. I had always seen the practice was going to a specialist or the one who does hair, you know, an expert in that area and getting your hair done. Um, so that was the first, and then she encouraged me to start braiding the grass in the back of the house. And that's where I started practicing on grass. I had never seen my grandmother's hair though, except for what was on the sides, you know, which was always gray, silver, really, really defined curls, beautiful. You know, when I think about it, I think she was a 3A ABC, which is like what we call a medium curl pattern. And understanding that kind of behavior, it's a lot more manageable. But then that generation, they wore scarves, they hid their hair. I think at that time, the idea of extensions had not really penetrated or weaves. Of course, that's like the older generation. Um, in that time of independence, you know, the conditioning then after colonization was for women, African women, to tie their hair, and that was a symbol of being subservient, maybe a house worker, out, you know, tending to the garden, basically a worker and a domestic worker. And I think even whether either even those who were in the countryside, there was conditioning there that that is the way they had to, you know, show up with long skirts and tying the hair. And also when you think about it, the breakdown of religion on our people to desert their customs, their culture, to adapt this new way of life of, you know, the Bible and Christianism and Catholicism and so on. And our people were broken, like severely broken, that the means of survival was to raid their own practices to adapt these new practices of of the colonialist. You know, it was a way of survival. You know, so you can imagine, you know, and having to dress different and adapt this new language and these new laws and abandoning your whole self. You know, so there's no foundation when you let go who you are, you know, and how we, you know, at times, this is how we've been so broken away that even admiring our natural hair is something for the last 20 years, you know. Although we see it in the 70s and the 60s in the US, and I think at that time there was you know, there was, but it was more like fight the powers, very political, people fighting for independence. And we see that it's happening again while technology is growing. You know, these days, you know, the world is super changing, and information is moving really fast. But we see like trends coming from the U.S. always impact the rest of the world, and I don't even think African Americans understand how much power they have and how much they're admired, that that culture is admired, because I think it always represents freedom. You know, even when you look in Asia, those trends are all American, how everybody's dressing today, that impact, you know. So but what we see is like the Americans, African Americans are embracing Africa or their African roots, and they're doing their history, you know. And it's great being in the middle of it. You know, it's great being, like, for me, it's the perfect world. Really, maybe their technology is going to bring us closer. You know, technology is going to heal. Technology is going to empower us. You know, while they come home, also. You know, yeah. So this natural hair journey is a true inspiration. My mother, just a little bit about her and her needing to fit in while she was around that age, they used to press their hair with irons. And at the time, irons were not plugged into the wall. It wasn't a time where people had electricity in their homes. So they would put charcoal in these irons and put their heads on beds or tables and straighten their hair like that. Like, that's risky, but that's what we did to fit in. That's what we've done. There's no other culture doing that, losing hair or traction alopecia, having shame. We're the only people, and you could see that it's really deeply correlated to colonization and slavery. The breaking of our having to abandon our natural practices that our ancestors had been doing for years. The connection with nature, eating wholesome foods, cooking, having pride in family, having systems where we didn't have presidents. And obviously, we see that it's an issue all around the world, but we had systems that were governed by elders, people who had lived that experience, and elders of great character. And you were selected. It wasn't one person running it, it was a community. And there were women involved because they also honored the input of women, because it's if you leave women out, society is not going to survive. And when I think about present day, you could see that the feminine divine women are becoming leaders and they're running their households, and it's a good thing. But I think the men shouldn't fall back too far. We should partner up instead of feeling that somebody has to be in control. How about everybody share leadership in their household, evenly, because it's the only way. um, and I think because women feel differently, and that's why even in the technology world, we see that we need more women, to input, you know, uh, because we think differently. We think for the masses. It's unfortunate, but they say that, you train a man and you train that one man, but if you train a woman, you train the village, because we tend to be a sharing community. Um, so yeah, so we're coming from those, you know, cultures that were governed by elders, and every age had a stage. They had a what we call, when expectation, like we hold expectations that, were accountable. When we got into, rights, it was believed that the mother was the first teacher because she's the one with the child most of the time, and that was honored. And women taught their family tree. You talked about the grandparents and the ancestors that came before then. That was our first education as Africans. That's how school started. And then you would go into the world, and then you would go to your groups, your bares in my culture, in the Kikuyu culture. So it's like age mates, and you held each other accountable. And there were certain expectations that you were, to meet. So when our societies got broken and we had to adapt to this new colonized way of being, we could see we lost ourselves, and we still are lost. You know, but we could see that maybe technology and having the youths, share more, speak up more, give more people a voice, even women being able to come on technology and on a device and speak up out loud. We see that, we get leaders, you know. So I think it's a good thing, just like our hair thing. It's developing. We're back to the natural hair journey, and we could see in the last 20 years, hair has our natural hair has created businesses, has billion-dollar, empires. It's given people who, and the reason, and not to mention women around the world, African women, African American women of melanated skin and highly textured hair. We are the highest growing industry in terms of small business across the globe. And it's a great opportunity because we have technology and we're serving our communities, because these are industries that have been forgotten, like the natural hair industry. People were sleeping on it. The Caucasians didn't see benefit in it. But you see that the Asians are studying us, and they're selling us all our man-made hair. They're making profits. But these industries, we need to take it back We need to take it back. The natural hair industry is making over $3 billion a year worldwide. That's freaking amazing to me, And I'm going to say that when I left corporate later in the years, as I grew up, and when I left corporate and decided to do the natural hair thing, I was surprised when I moved to the US. I was surprised that I could manage my bills doing what I loved. And growing up in my African culture, being a hairstylist was something like, you know, maybe like low level, or maybe you won't be able to have a great life. And sometimes we need to stop listening to society because it's not true. If I had listened to that, I wouldn't be here today, you know. But I've been touched by so many lives. I have touched so many lives. Um, yeah. So the industry now bring, a little fast forward, going to Canada, learning to manage my own hair, getting introduced. My sister was such a fan of mine doing hair and getting her hair done. And she would be creative and she said, let's try these braids, let's do our hair like this, let's do that. And over and over. Um, and I think I started building my confidence because she would allow me the creative space, to without ever giving negative comments, but she would just be whatever it is. Even when I would do something on her hair and not like it, she would wear it with pride and always brag that I was doing her hair, even when I didn't want her to, when I didn't feel good about myself. And, because that's who we are. Uh, so I start managing my own hair as we're growing. And, as life would have it, y- I started doing the neighborhood, so for me it was a natural practice. It's something that came naturally and really came from a desire of survival. You know, necessity is a mother of invention. That is really true where it comes to that for me. And so eventually that's what I was known for. And I started, when I switched my name from from Anne to Kirigo, and decided I was going to only answer to my cultural name. um, it's when I started going deeper into myself and, allowing myself to have full self expression as I tapped in and spent a lot of time with my grandparents and their level of wisdom. We would talk about religion, survival, being a good woman, cooking. My grandfathers were about, have to be a woman who contributes in your household, and great lessons that I pull till today. You know, but when in being in Montreal, that means of survival, what I had lived on my grandparents' property, I started creating my own business. I didn't even know I was creating a business. It was just sort of like, hey dad, can I use the business and do my friend's hair in there? That's really how that came. And then my mom was like, hey, you can't feed everybody this food unless you contribute. Well, our groceries are for the family, and you're feeding all your friends that come in here and blah blah blah. That's not in our budget. And I'll be like, what are these people talking about budget? And then my dad would be, you better keep my basement clean, and you should be paying rent. And I would be like, what's this rent? Like literally they would say that and laugh. But those were the first seeds of learning how to run a business, which I didn't think that's what I was doing at the time, but I see where it has led me today. And then my brothers, again, from necessity, not too many black barbers who could cut their hair, they started learning how to cut their hair. So our weekends were full of music, jamming in the basement, doing us making money. Um, as in the children learning how to clean up, because my dad was not going to play that. He loves order, and to think about how those early lessons is everything I do today. I even teach it, which is really funny. And even how that is correlated, like when COVID broke, I was used in the US as the natural hair leader on how to keep a salon clean. And I was sponsored by the largest sanitization business in the US. And they actually started in Europe and went to the US. And yeah, and so they called me, because of the work that they had seen. I guess social media, this is what social media could do for you. It opens you up to different things. I wasn't looking for that contract, and that opened me up to a new uh, place, and then people would look at me as the natural hairstylist who leads as a leader, especially by then. And we all got certified to for COVID-19 to be able to run our industries. And I remember reopening our businesses in the US and here in Kenya. I wanted all of my staff to make sure that they were trained in that course so that there was no excuses, especially when we were risking lives. And as a salon owner or a business owner, you're responsible for your staff and you're responsible for your customers. And I was well aware of that. And, especially being in the US where people get sued, for almost everything, how I conduct myself is like, you know, I'm hard. I don't like. I wouldn't want to be caught sleeping, in a way, and then be held responsible for something that, for negligence when very well know, how we're supposed to be doing things. So all these things, I think, that early foundation from my parents' home, and then later on being able to run several businesses later, and be a mentor in this industry, I could see that foundation matters. Just like healthy hair, natural hair, foundation matters, especially if you're thinking about locking your hair, because that's my specialty. A healthy foundation is necessary. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of where that came from. And then then I worked but at the same time I wasn't getting the full support about doing hair as a business. My parents were very adamant about me getting a full education. So I studied economics in college, Concordia University to be exact, in Montreal. Big up to Concordia. I did economics for a while and management, hated it, almost got depressed. And then my parents asked me, what did I want to do? I wanted to get into arts. There we went again with African parents who believed that arts was not a way of survival. And I said, I'll pay for myself, So the next 3 years were the most difficult years of my life because I had to live on my own, pay for my education, and thank goodness it was just me. I only had to take care of myself, but it was good. It was that struggle was also a good foundation in terms of being independent. Managing your budget, making sure you pay rent or you're going to be kicked out. I was not going to play that. I was not going to be evicted. I was not going to have a history of that. I have a little pride in myself, and I had something to prove to my dad. Um, and my parents, because if I was going to choose the arts, that meant then I had to educate myself. So I went in. I did fashion design. I learned how to do production management, which was really connected to the management courses I had done at the other university. I got a job. Like, actually, I didn't look for a job. The school, I did really well because I was finally in a place where I could be creative. I could wear my hair the way I wanted to. I could dress how I wanted to. And that art school was all about come as yourself, And I remember even Deepa, she's a big designer here in Kenya. We were in the same school and she wore a paper bag one day as a skirt. And I was like, girl, you are all the way everything, and that freed me up just to see her create a skirt from paper bags. And look at her today. She's Lupita's designer. Like, what? That's my classmate. That's my friend. So that school really helped us find our own identity. I remember locking my class in a trends, locking my hair, and I was going to a trends class, and my trends teacher, and she was a white woman, white French woman who has the most incredible fashion I've ever seen on a woman till today. I've never seen anybody top that. And she was my teacher. And again, this was a fashion school. So we were encouraged to come in as creatives, and whether it was art, painting, designing clothing, whatever it was, even if it was technology, we were really encouraged to come as our own individuals. And that was such a refreshing place to be, from coming to a place where you have to conform and then do you. So I remember I twisted my hair for the first time. I did a two-strand twist and I said, I undid the twist and I said, I'm going to lock my hair, and just undid the twist. And I came, they kind of look, how we, two-strand twists, when you take them out, they come up wavy, depending on your curl pattern. And so I took them out. I had about 4 or 5 inches. And so my hair was sticking up everywhere. And my trends teacher says, "Oh, I love that. That's the future." Oh, really? And just hearing her say that, I've never looked back. She told us about the future being about plastics. Today, everybody's got an ATM card. She told us about having cars that are going to tell you where to go. I drive one of those. She drove, she told us things that in the time when she was telling us this, I thought she had lost her freaking mind. And honestly, she was telling us the truth. It is the truth today. The natural hair thing is the truth today. And when she told me this many years back, and when I started, I remember my first year of coming from that art school and coming to Kenya and visiting. My mom looks at me and she was like, because she had told me I can't lock my hair under her roof, but I was no longer under her roof. So that was my first liberation, was to lock my hair. And I came home and my aunties were like, "Who's gonna marry you?" That was the first question. Was I trying to be a Mau Mau? My answer was yes. And everything that they brought on me, of course, I speak up for the underdog, so I had to speak up for myself. I had an answer for every question, trying not to be rude, but I had an answer for every question, especially because I felt like my identity was being judged. Um, and I remember about 4 days after that, I started wrapping my hair. Coming from this school of arts, freedom, rain, to then hearing this from my aunties over and over again. I think by day 4, I started wrapping my hair, and then my brothers came in. My brother came in from, I think, China. The other one came in from Canada, and they were like, "Hey, why are you wrapping your hair?" Right away, like, get that thing down. Again, men in my life have been the ones to always encourage me to be me. Um, and I remember my uncle, no, my brother's telling me, "Stop wrapping your hair. It looks great." Especially my brother who was living in China. He was also locking his hair. So of course we were being looked at as the rebels of the family. And I remember feeling like, even my grandmother asked me what I was going to do with my hair for if when I was going to get married. And I remember that's actually the year I was going to get married to my husband, who's African American. Uh, and I don't think I had never heard him say anything about my hair, the way it was, or ever anything. So I didn't hear anything from there. But I remember having to ask my dad what he thought about my hair, when I had come with my locks for the first time. And my dad just asked me if I was paying my rent. He just said, "Are you paying your rent?" And I said, "Yes." And he left the room. And that was the only conversation we've ever had about my hair. Because for him, it's like, when you're independent, do you? Like, what is this? What are you talking about? If he has nothing to do with how I'm living or me, my dependency on him, then nobody, basically, that what I took away from that if I'm being independent, taking care of myself, I'm not hurting anybody, why should I worry about what people are saying? Do me. Yeah, so that's so from there on, every time I came back to Kenya, more and more of my friends were locking their hair, more men, more women. But when I started doing that in Canada, people thought I was a Rasta or if it was a spiritual thing. And I was like, I just hate combing my hair. It hurts. That's it. Why can't somebody just accept that? You know? Why do I have to be part of a something? Why can't it just be that it hurts? Why can't anybody? And you can imagine that years later, I still felt like nobody could hear me. Nobody was understanding what this self-expression was about. You know, so but it's been a lovely journey. I just want to say that this natural hair journey thing is so real for me. Like, it is my life. It is. I've seen women go perm their hair until they have no more hair. I've seen women braid their hair until they have no more hair to braid, um, because of that continuous shame and unacceptance of who we are, how we are, and how we were created to be. And we could see that trauma does affect who we are. Colonization, slavery, standards, Euro standards of beauty. But things are changing. Things are changing. Look at the world today. Everybody's listening to this Nigerian music. Who knew that African music would be often popping and leading in all the charts, and everyone and their mother from Asia to the Caribbean dancing to the same music because of technology, right? And so the more we see that, we see that we're being freed up. Our African culture is on the rise. People admire it and have always admired it. I think that's why colonization had to come and crush it, because once we start connecting with who we are, we have this strong sense of identity and we can enjoy ourselves. And coming from East Africa, where we were a product of colonization, and West Africa is a subproduct. So like they didn't lose their practices for culture like we did. They still, thank goodness we didn't lose our languages, but we see more and more the younger generation is losing language, like their mother tongue. Um, we see like distraction of like tribal wars still continuing, which is crazy to me, because we're still in this space of colonization. We're still in a deep sleep. We need to be what they say woke, but we really need to wake up and have a high level of consciousness. And the healthier we are, the more we are wearing our own natural hair, not wearing chemical. The more we eat and exercise and feed ourselves, good nutrition, mentally, physically, and spiritually. I think that would really help us. You can see these days in the big trends, especially since Sister Locks. By the way, I am a Sister Locks brand ambassador, one of five master stylists, and we're the only ones in the world. So I'm happy to be like, yay, Kenya, go. We're always somewhere, to be recognized. Uh, Even I know that one of the real major reasons that I also made it to be one of those master stylists is because I brought my authentic self. I brought Africa everywhere. I wanted to make sure that when you saw me, you thought of my native land, or you thought you connected me with Africa. From my name. That's why I don't even use my British name. I don't use an English name anymore, because this is like my way of, we have to peel an onion, right, to get to the best of it. So it's like taking all those layers off. um so that's part of it, and really sticking to I remember even coming back, some of my cousins would be like, you call yourself Kirigo? Like, yes, that's my name. That's like my ancestral name. But yes, I'm gonna call myself that. Even my children in the US, they have unique names. My son is called Moja because he's my first child, and then we have Santina, Wanjico. And Santina is also, I love the Spanish language. I love languages, period. And it means like she's blessed. And because we have, African American mix in there, I made sure that my children, followed my culture. So my son is named after my father, his middle name, and my daughter's named after my mother, because, their father didn't really have any preferences. He was just happy to have healthy children. So I had an up on that too, because usually in my culture, it's like the man names them first and then the woman. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna do me in this one. Again, the way I've lived is unconventional. Like when people do this, I do that. I actually, and it's not because I don't want to do what other people are doing. I do what I'm so connected to my spiritual creator. Like I'm always asking for the universe to guide me in everything that I do with the people that I'm come around. I pray for that. I pray for my clients, and even beyond that, So for me, I know everything is more of an appointment than a coincidence, you know. And I just watch life unfold, continuously unfold for me. So that's how I live. So a lot of times it doesn't always look like it's after the rhythm and the way society has designed it. And here's an example. When I was raising my children, now they're young adults, hallelujah. When I was raising my children, I thought I believe in global education because I was exposed to that. So I would, they would start 6 months in school, and then I would say, okay, I want to go to Kenya, or I want to go to a different place in the world, and I would go because I believe in global education. I believe that a classroom could never expose children to life the way life can, and that was a fact for me. However, mine was intentional. My father's, he did it because of his job. I was very intentional of how I was going to raise my children. And so when I was ready to have children, I was ready to be a mom. It didn't happen as an accident. Um, and the type of mom I was going to be one that was going to make sure that my children, whether they were born in America or anywhere in the world, they were going to know Africa. They were going to know Kenya. They were going to know the culture. They were going to get to know me, and they were going to get to know who they are, as much as possible. So we would go school 6 months, and then I'll be like, all right, school, we're leaving. We're going to Kenya. And I would be threatened by the schools. They would even tell me that they'll call the police on me because if a child doesn't show up in America in 15 days in a row, then they have the right to call the police. I'll like call them. We'll be in Kenya. Tell them that's where I'll be. They could come there for me, and then it became the norm. And but one thing I was adamant about is that my children had to do well in school. So if I was going to do that, they had to keep up with their grades. So even when I came here, I would put them in schools here or get tutors and earlier on, before even COVID happened, my children already knew how to go to school online because I found an American school that had education online prior so that they won't stop me. So I just would be like, okay, fine, we're transferring to the online school. I would leave, they would have their grades, then we could come back. I really got to know the law, but how I didn't get there just like that. I read the book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and the author of that book, God bless him, he was do not live in a box. Live your life the way you want to live it. Create a life of travel. It's great for the children, and reading all the different ways. Oh, I could cut off this bill and I could stop paying my car insurance and I could do this and I'll have enough money to live in. And that's how I did it initially. But every time I'd come back, then I'd run out of money. I'd go back to the US and work. And eventually one day I sat down and I asked my dad, how am I going to make this life? Because it was a struggle. I was just testing life out. I'm not afraid to test things out. And yes, it's a big risk to test my children and so on, but they learned how to adapt. My children have been lived in Tanzania. They've lived in Montreal, Canada. They went to French camp and they didn't even know how to speak French. They've they went to all different places in Kenya. They've been to all different parts of the world, Costa Rica, just for different types of education. Um, and so now they don't struggle. They don't struggle to travel. It's like second nature for them. In fact, they love it, especially my daughter, because she was absolutely my travel buddy. And she's unafraid to travel by herself around the world. And it's just like her mommy. I'm so proud. If nothing else, that's my legacy right there. And just offering them a different perspective in life, that you don't have to live in a box. For me, that's it. And that if nothing else in my message is like, please don't live in a box. Oops. Don't live in a box because life is so limited when you live in a box. You know, try something else, take a different route home, and that's how it starts, just changing little things. If you usually wash your face and then your body, start the other way. If you usually put your bra and then your underwear, start the other way. I'm always like, just do things, um, not always so consistently. Just try different ways until you find what's naturally floats your boat. Yeah. So I sat down and I asked my dad, how can I live this life? How can I live in the US? And because I was determined to raise my children there too, of course, because of their dad. And there are certain laws. You can't just take the American children out of the country, without acceptance from both parents. So I had to raise them there and here. There was an agreement that we would do both. Um, so my question was then, how would I do that? And so I sat down and I asked my dad, like, seriously, how? And my father is always the type of person, I always go to him when I have major decisions in my life. Um, and my mom is how I need to raise my children. So I asked him, how do I do that? And he said, well, you have to plan. You've got to plan, you've got to save, you got to think it through, you got to think about what you can do, and so on. And that's how I started my business in Kenya. because the only thing I could think about was this thing that I do naturally. And every time I came here, my friends wanted me to do their hair. They wanted me. When once I became a Sisterlocks consultant, all my friends were like, well, then do, because I started wearing it. When I realized instead of talking about it, I need to wear it. And people were just seeing the development in my hair. So when I would come, people like June Gashui, she's, a big star here in Kenya as well, um, and a lawyer and all that good stuff. She got her hair done initially, and some of the friends of mine who have passed away, God rest their soul in peace. But they were those like my early pioneers. I would do their hair, and then every time I come, it was a cousin or something, and that then I would do it at home or in their house, or we spend a weekend together, and then I was thinking like, then who follows up? Who takes care of their hair? If I do this, I could teach them how to do their hair, but these are conservative women who don't have that kind of time, nor do they want to do that. And they're used to being, taken care of. They're used to going to the salon life. So I had to start thinking about how I'm going to solve that problem. And, business is about solving a problem. A lot of times we don't realize that. But if you can solve somebody's problem, then you're in business. You just have to figure out how to run it and at the end of the day, exchange the service or the product for cash. But generally, business is about solving a problem. And so that's how it started. And then when I would come back, now their friends want their hair done. I don't know these people. I'm not coming to strangers' homes because I've grown up with that American mentality. You just can't go to people's homes. You don't know what's going to happen to you when you're in there, that type of security. And of course, being told that by my friends who were cops and so on. So my brother had a storage room and all his stuff from China was sitting in there for years and he had never done anything with it. And I went in there and I brought my parents and I said, "What do you guys think about this space? What if I cleaned all this stuff out and then created a space for me to start doing hair here in Kenya?" And they were like, "Yeah, that's a good idea. We can help, as always, my number one supporters. We can help." And so my mom's always like, "Well, what's going to happen to this stuff?" So I had already thought, where would I move it? There's another storage in my parents' property, a garage, an old garage. We could put it in there and so on and so forth. I quickly called my brother and asked him if that was okay for me to move his stuff and use that space that actually was his. And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "And later on, if this works, I'll pay you rent. Um, because now I knew about rent. I knew it was a thing. So, and that's how I got started. I started there. So all these, what you call clients, new clients, new customers, at the time for me was strangers, because my business was solely with family. Now I was serving the new public. I just thought, okay. And then learning, I had to get a license. I had to, do all of these things. And each time I came, I did something. I either painted when I first started, I started as the room was, it was not that cute. But it was a beginning and it was a hard chair. Poor client. Forgive me for that. I was on survival mode. And then eventually I got to the point where I could afford a chair or find a supplier, get the chair, get the business license, start, doing this M-Pesa thing. I remember my cousin telling me, "Oh, you're really going to need to set up your M-Pesa account." And I was like, "I'm not doing that. I come and go." The very next day I was doing it. And that's how it would work. My cousins would give me feedback. Those were the people on the ground. I had to listen to them. And when you're building a business, you need those people who are on the ground or who are interacting with you, you need to get all the free information, that they're giving you, the feedback, and not take it personally because it actually helps. Um, yeah, and that's how I got started. And then I grew and to a point where I had one person working, and then it was two, and then it was three, and then we started collaborating with other stylists from Europe and the US when they came down. And then by then, even with the Sister Locks head office, I asked them to put Kenya on the map because I had set myself up here, and they did. And so now when people were looking, they would see Kenya and then call that number and we would serve them. And that's how we've grown. So it's 10 years. First of all, this year makes 30 years, Sister Locks, since Dr. Joanne Cornwell created this wonderful, incredible hair system. Big up to Dr. C. Thank you so much. You changed my life. And And but then we have other problems, now, and it's 30 years since she created this hair system. It's 10 years that I've been able to run my business here in Kenya, all the same year, which is amazing. I didn't never even knew that. But it's 10 years later, and we could see the industry. There's so many people claiming that they do sister locks in Kenya, and they don't. They've never trained. They just know, like, because we see it on YouTube and Pinterest and all of this stuff, and it's in high demand across the globe. And we see that women, conservative women, women who work in the government, as you could see, even the judge. Katinji in the United States. That was like a big opener. I remember a lot of the doctors and lawyers who are behind the scenes and are weave wearers now are the ones who are coming out the closet, to come get their hair naturally taken care of. So we're seeing a huge trend. And I still think that there's so much more we could do in this industry, so much more room for more creativity. I don't even think we're there yet, just because we're still waking up from our colonized minds and our slave minds, being deeply conditioned to be ashamed of ourselves in our natural state. So, but I think, like, as we continue to wake up, I can't wait to see what's to come. Like with my nieces and nephew, they're young. They all wear their hair natural. They wear their froze. They're like, I just love it. I love seeing, and also seeing, who the impact that I've had on my in-laws, my sister-in-laws. They stopped perming their hair, they stopped straightening it out. Yeah, that from my sister, everyone, the salons that I've worked in the US, especially Canada, we turned that thing around. Everybody stopped wearing perm. So because I'm not afraid to preach, it's healthy for us to leave our hair in its natural state, especially when we're putting chemicals. Those are the people who I'm urging. As you see today, there's so many lawsuits with African Americans and in the U.S. because they've been poisoned by those chemicals for so many years. Because we don't understand our hair, and we're the only people, again, understanding our natural hair and its behaviors. It's how the cuticle is designed and how it connects on our scalp. you know this is another fact, how our hair connects in the scalp. There's a little bit of space that's left open between the skin and where the follicle opens up for the hair to grow, and that place is where the chemical settles, and that's how it would get into the bloodstream, because right below that is the sac that holds the blood that nourishes that hair strand, right? So yeah, so that's pretty much it. You good? Yeah. So that's pretty much it. And yeah, so to my sisters who are still chemicalizing your hair, there are different solutions today for your natural hair. There really are. I would do a little bit more research, maybe in your area. For me, I'm always go. I will always be the one to say, just lock your hair, just get those sister locks in, and get experience a freedom that we've never experienced. You know, I'm all about the brand, and also starting my own training um, classes here in Kenya. We, for years, I have beckoned with the Sister Locks head office, and but they have to do what they need to do. And I've also developed my own training system now that we're bringing to this country, just because of what I'm seeing with the step sister locks. you know um I'm not here to shame stylists, because I understand that we have to put food on the table, but we have to be in a space of integrity, please. Right? We have to take care of our clients, and if we are doing sister locks, then we need to give them the brand. And if you're not giving them the brand, call it something else. Call it something else, make it yours, give it your name. you know because what's going on at Studio 28 is that we're getting a lot of women. I get a lot of women, like this time around, I get a lot of women who come with damaged hair, or they come saying that they know it's not sister locks, it doesn't look like our girls or our customers look, actually our dream clients. Because running a business is understanding how to turn your customers into clients, then turning them into dream clients. And those are the dream clients, are the ones that grow the business, not the one which always call the chair hopper, who bounces from one salon to the next, I don't think they could be satisfied. They're just looking for something. I wish them all the best, you know. But what we're looking to do is build relationship with our clients that we could serve the same client for years to come, 7 years, 10 years. I've successfully managed to do that. And it's great to see even this time around seeing clients who got their hair installed 7 years ago with me and their hair is flourishing, because they continue to listen to the advice and follow protocol. Because when we look at these like tiny locks, and on social media, they're so beautiful. The women look, there's a certain kind of confidence. Let's just say natural hair as a whole, right? There's a certain kind of confidence, even with the braids. There's a certain kind of confidence we have when we're in our cultural look, you know. And we have to we have to big that up, because that's also telling us that we are beginning to admire ourselves and really appreciate how we look in our natural skin. That's great. Um, we still have a lot ways to go, but I'm happy to see a lot of young girls in their natural state. I meet a lot of girls these days, even women who are 18, 19, and they've decided to go through the fundamentals of interlocking their hair. And whether you're locking your hair traditionally, which I did for 15 years, or you're looking to lock your hair with sister locks or micro locks or whatever the choice is, um, it's great that we have all these choices that we can still leave our hair in its natural state. You know, even with the braids, all these new braids, the knotless braids, we're finally like creating systems, healthy systems to address our hair. Because a lot of women, including myself, I'm a victim of that hairline gone back 5 centimeters and stuff like that, simply because of traction, braids that are too tight, not understanding what we're doing, not understanding the damage that it causes our hair when we're not understanding what we're doing. We see it, someone else do it, and as Africans, we're so brilliant. We could see someone else do it and we could copy it. But if we don't have the understanding of why am I braiding it this way? What is the curl pattern? What is behavior? How is it growing? Is its density, all the things that make us who we are, as creative as we are. So this has been a great podcast. I'm so happy dropping the podcast in Kenya. This was like something I wanted to do, and I really wanted to start here where it all started. My birthplace. I also want to say a great thanks to my team. Team Studio 28, Natural Hair Journey team, Natural Hair Mentorship team. All of you guys, I wouldn't be able to be here without y'all. A great thank you to my family for being so supportive to me, and just thank you to Kenya for being, um, I've always thought that most of my followers were in the US. And every time I come here, I am flabbergasted at how many people recognize me and celebrate me. So I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you to my brothers and sisters home. Thank you. Thank you for making me feel at home. Thank you for helping me establish a business that you trust. Thank you for trusting us with your hair. And thank you for those who've come and told me that my team is excellent. Uh, uh, and thanks to the followers.